Hey nerds, it's Nathan and we're back for another book review, and it is going to be part of Project Absolute Zero, and that is our prequel, Gleanings by Neal Shusterman. This is a part of the Scythe series. Look, you can see where my rabbits chewed the page and chewed the corner, and then my boss spilt water, so all the back pages are a bit crinkly and water damaged. I did my best to save them. This book went through the absolute ringer, so anyway, let's get on with it. For those who don't know, Scythe is a young adult sci-fi series which explores the idea of mortality and morality and AI, ironically. But this was pretty much all done before our modern idea of AI, so keep that in mind when reading the book. The premise of the book is essentially the AI, the cloud, develops into the Thunderhead and takes over the world, except it's not Skynet and, the robots rise against us. It actually wants to help us. The only purpose it has is to work for us. Eventually, the AI cleans up the Earth, solves pretty much all of its problems, and reaches a point where our technology and medicine pretty much keeps us immortal. But then we're still left with one problem: overpopulation. Now, the Thunderhead, the AI, understands that he has no right to tell people or control birth, control the creation of life, and it has no right to determine who should die. So here in comes the Scythedom. Yes, the Scythedom. Very edgy. Essentially, a group of specialized individuals that are given the legal right to kill, but they've renamed it Glean. Don't ask me why, but gleaning is killing. Because the only faction that could understand human mortality is humans. So the Thunderhead leaves it in their jurisdiction. We follow the story of several apprentices going through training, becoming scythes, all the other adventures and misadventures and everything else as we go through the trilogy. It is the Scythe, the Thunderhead, and the Toll is our 3 books. And then we have this, Gleanings, which is a collection of short stories set both before and some of them around the same period, even during or just slightly after the settings of the book. And Neal Shusterman's done it again, honestly. The book in and of itself, or the story, the series in and of itself, I'm going to move this here so I don't knock it. Still look good? Yeah, still looks good. The series in and of itself has a pretty in-depth look at this concept of purpose. When everything's taken care of, when nobody actually has any real problems, it's amazing what people will then complain about. It's amazing how people will find a purpose, or they will just be able to accept something as their purpose, even though they're actually not needed. Like, they're literally not required. The Thunderhead allows people to have jobs simply for the fact that if humanity doesn't work, we kind of fall by the wayside. So the Thunderhead also sort of creates like this idea of experimentation where it will allow certain regions. There's no countries anymore, by the way. There's regions. Certain countries are blended together, and there's a mass mix of genetics, which is what we really should be in this modern day and age. But certain regions are allowed to experiment with ideas. Down in the Antarctic, there's a region down there, and everyone can share what it basically does communal dreaming, which is really, really interesting. And we explore that story in one of our stories in Gleanings. one of the regions allow for, what do you call it, like extreme genetic and body modification, and then another one basically has no concept of gender. It's quite literally gender fluid, and I think we meet in the third book, The Toll. I think we do meet a gender fluid individual, and once again, this was before a lot of the current issues and stigma and things like that before AI came out, and before all of our issues with gender and gender identity and all the stuff you see in the news. This was written long before that, so there's no political leaning. It is strictly based on the idea and concepts of societies that do that, or individuals that do certain things. So the series overall is excellent. The characters are interesting, I think, because especially the Scythes, forgive me, I'm exhausted. So much renovation happening to the house. The Scythes pretty much have free reign. Nobody wants to say no to a Scythe, for the simple fact that the Scythe has every right to glean them for any particular reason that they choose. So Scythes pretty much get whatever they want, whenever they want. So the Scythes are very kind of out there, flamboyant, both charismatic and enigmatic characters. They're quite over the top in one form or another, either in their seriousness to their role or their craft, or in their extreme flamboyance of trying to break the mold of what a Scythe should be, or how the community should perceive them. In Gleanings, we get a more closer look at a lot of different Scythes and a lot of different just regular everyday people and their interactions with Scythes. Neal has a really great way of getting to the point without having to overemphasize or really dig in. These are short stories. Like, this is a short book by itself. As you can see, I think it's only 200 odd pages. Oh, sorry, I lied. It's 400 odd pages. And one of the stories is set just after what they call the mortal age. So there's the post-mortal age and the mortal age, and that was when basically the period after the Thunderhead took over and eliminated all disease and eliminated all aspects of, hardship. Essentially, he destroyed poverty, he destroyed war, he took away borders and countries, the whole shebang. And it focused on an art class. It focused on a teacher and her students, and the teacher was what they called a pre-mortal aged person, or a mortal aged person. Essentially, that person was born before the Thunderhead took over. They got to see what the world was like before and after. And there's a whole bunch of little moments where the teacher will say little quips, and they'll just go straight over a person's head because they've never understood proper hardship. So the saying means nothing. I think at one point she said, when the going gets tough, and all the students were like, the fuck does that mean, when the going gets tough? A Scythe comes to their class and essentially gives them an opportunity and says, I want you to create something new. This post-mortal aged art sucks, and it does, and it's referenced through all three books and in this several times. Post-mortal age art sucks. So she wants them to really dig deep. She wants to make a competition out of it, and because she's a Scythe, she gets whatever she wants. She basically goes to the head of the arts degree university and said, I'm doing this with these students, tough. And he goes, okay, I guess they don't have to worry about their exams, they don't have to worry about their classes, they just focus on what they do. And with the threat of death and mortality looming over. Glad I fucking fixed that recently. With death and mortality looming over them, it pushed them to like their height, their limit. And some of them really excelled, and some of them sort of just could only do what they could do, which was digitalized stuff that had to do with the post-mortal age. And it was really interesting seeing that perspective, having someone essentially their life hangs in the balance on their art, which is how it is today. Someone who is an artist, they make their livelihood off it. Their life really hangs on the balance of their skill, of their art, of their popularity. And in post-mortal times, it doesn't, because if their art sucks, or if their art is generic and the same as everybody else's, they're still taken care of. The Thunderhead won't let anyone suffer. So this pushed them, and it was really interesting. The idea behind the winning artwork, I'm not going to spoil it, but the idea behind the winning artwork was actually really beautiful. And in a later story, it was said to be the greatest piece of post-mortal artwork of the mortal age. And I really like that they touched on that later on. I really like that throughout a few 100-year span of their own history, they looked at it and they went, this is the closest piece of art that we can truly describe as mortal, as beautiful. And it was really, really, I liked it. I thought it was a nice little touch to add that in a later story. Another story which was really, really interesting, another concept, was the fact that crime basically doesn't exist, but the Thunderhead still allows people to be impulsive and reckless. It can never breach someone's free will, essentially. It never wants to, and I don't think it has the capability of being able to stop someone from doing something that they want to do. And essentially, if you're a criminal, you're no longer classed as a criminal anymore. There's no jails anymore. You're called a unsavory. I'm sorry if you can hear all the shit clattering around me. It's I thought I caught the last of the wind, but clearly I was wrong. And so it looks into this aspect that it gives people who want to live an unsavory lifestyle the ability to do so. There's the Nimbus office with Nimbus agents. That's a Cloud reference if you don't know. And essentially we follow the story of one young girl. She's trying to go up the ranks of the unsavory, and essentially you could kill someone if really need be. But if you become hyper aggressive about it, they just turn some of the nanites in your brain so you don't have that kill urge. It's also a massive pain in the ass because it's a massive cost, because if you kill someone, they're never dead. They're dead-ish. They're dead-ish, and they're just revived. They're put into a revival center, and you're footed with the bill. But if you're an unsavory, you probably don't work, but you get something which is essentially like the doll, and you basically do something that's very similar to community service, and you go into a halfway house almost, and you live with other unsavories. But there are entire streets or even neighborhoods dedicated to businesses designed for unsavory behavior, with like various forms of prostitution or gambling and violence, excessive drunk, like purposely. You can go to places and get purposely excessively drunk. Basically, they turn off the nanites in your body so you can reach a particular level of intoxication. And essentially, in the story, this young girl is sort of exploring the idea, and they go to a place where it's full of art. It's full of all this art, and they get to go ham. Like, they just get to beat the shit out of the curator, and they get to destroy all the artworks and everything. And then as they're leaving, she sort of stops and waits a minute, and people are coming in, just rapidly cleaning everything up and then replacing all the artwork, because as we said before, all the art of the modern day kind of sucks, and it's just replica of old school ancient art. Pardon me. And so it dawns on her that it's not real vandalism. It's monitored, safe, pre-designed vandalism. And then it begs the question, it's like, well, it's not real unsavoryism. And so she's like, where does one break free? Because the system is designed to allow us to do what we want and be as reckless as we want and impulsive and as destructive as we want. And there's even places designed for us to go and be destructive. But what the fuck? Because it's all still part of the system. They're no less of a pawn, I should say, than anybody else. Not that they're pawns, but they're still part of the mechanism. They're still part of the game. They're still part of the system. And it was really interesting to look at this idea of, I suppose, criminality. This idea of crime and impulse and individualism when it essentially doesn't exist. Like, if you tried to stop someone, that's when you actually have an issue. Like, if you try to stop people from committing crimes, or you try to enforce laws that those people don't want to follow, they just break them anyway. And then there becomes a greater struggle, there becomes greater consequence to both sides, the enforcing side and the law-breaking side, for the simple fact that there's resistance. But then when there's no resistance, a lot of these unsavories, they get bored. Like, it's not a lifelong thing. They just can't do it. They want to be able to have access, because that's the only real punishment, is that they lose access to particular privileges. But they get to keep everything else. They get their freedom, essentially. They still have a purpose because they have to work. They get paid. They have a place to stay. They have a community. They have specifically built areas that allow them to get into bar fights and, go whoring and all kinds of stupid things, right? Be destructive, be impulsive, steal. There's actually like places that will have lesser security on purpose, and they're actually compensated by the Thunderhead every time that they get shit stolen from, for the purposeful act of making other people feel better. Like, it's a really interesting concept. Maybe not to you. I thought it was a really wild idea, actually. There's a really funny story in here about a Scythe who eventually learns his place with a pet dog that he stole from someone else. He gleans them and takes the dog. And then it's just this funny set of events where the dog is, like, essentially trying to kill him as, like, revenge. It's very funny. I liked it. Another really wild one was a Scythe that purposely goes around and kills people who are non-believers. So essentially, there are people out there that don't believe the Scythe exist. They don't believe the Scythedom exists. It's all a big part of a conspiracy. Oh, the Scythedom is just to sell merch. The whole thing. It's like they do live, like, Gleanings sometimes. They do things where they have something called Conclave. And Conclave is almost like the red carpet. Like, it is wild how excited people get, because like, celebrityism doesn't really exist anymore. The only real celebrities are, like, the Scythes. They're the top dogs. They're the most exclusive of exclusive clubs. So people believe that it's a lie. And it's like, well, I've met people who have had family members gleaned, and it's like, but did you see it? Was it real? I don't think so. It was the flat earther logic put towards the death of people, and it was very entertaining. But there was one part that really, really stuck with me, and it was the fact that this Scythe gleans a non-believer or a conspiracy theorist, whatever you want to call them, and the conspiracy theorist, as they're about to die, they say, like, it doesn't matter if you kill me, because people are gonna believe what they believe. And she's like, no, eventually people are gonna get the message. This is my life's mission, to basically expose the truth to people, that they can't shelter their eyes from things. And they're like, no. They're like, that's not how it works. And it's like, we've been told hundreds of times. People have presented me and my family the evidence. And it's like, but this is just what we believe. And they're like, and she's like, well, you're wrong, because I'm here. I'm about to kill you. Literally about to kill you. And he was like, you'll never make the world believe if they don't want to. And then there is a little excerpt, like almost like a like a journal entry from the Thunderhead at the end of the story, that sort of re-goes over that idea that this particular Scythe spent her entire career trying to glean non-believers of one form or another to make them see that the Scythedom is real, or whatever they don't believe in that actually is a fact is real, that it never works. And to me, that one was kind of crazy. I really liked it, but it was kind of jarring for the simple fact of how real that was. Like, Neal Shusterman is a great author because of his concepts. I don't think he's one of these people, one of these authors that, you know, you just can't stop talking about his characters and his prose and everything else. I think the thing that makes Shusterman, I hope I'm saying that right, Shusterman. I hope the thing that makes Neal great is his concepts and his execution of those concepts. The execution of his idea behind the Thunderhead and how he world built, and this idea of the Scythedom, their rules, their, you know, their weird sort of ceremonialism with certain areas. I think he has a really, really, really clever way of taking an idea and being able to actually present it to you, the reader. There's some people, like, you read blurbs sometimes and you go, that sounds like a fucking hectic story, and then you read it and it fell so far short because the concept was great but the execution was poor. This is one of those things where I don't think it matters what particular idea or message Neal is trying to write, he can write it. He can give you a character that fits in one side of the mold and the other side of the mold of whatever argument he's trying to put in front of you, whatever scenario he's trying to put in front of you. And then I think he allows them to move so fluidly through that situation that it feels real, if that actually makes sense. In The Toll, we look at basically someone who becomes a religious icon through the idea of the Thunderhead, and acts as the only human speaking voice for the Thunderhead, which has never happened in human history. And then we see this kind of like occultism essentially happen. We have this mass religion happen in the third book around one individual, because he was given slightly more power than everybody else. And it's wild. It is not a very difficult concept to really think of, but I imagine it would be a very difficult concept to write. And when I read it, it felt so real, so natural, that it could have been almost like a fucking prediction. So that's my take on Neal Shusterman. on the Scythe series. It's one of my favorites. It's up there. It's on my shelf. And Gleanings is no exception. It is a wonderful set of short stories. I would recommend, at the very least, reading the first book before reading this. I know some people like to read everything in chronological order. I would say you wouldn't have to read the whole series, but at least read the first book to have a better understanding of where this sits. But yeah, it was fucking fantastic. It was absolutely fantastic. I can feel a little bit spits of rain, so I'm going to finish up there. And yeah, so that's one book down for Project Absolute Zero, and about fucking 20 more to go. Yeah, see you around.